You're listening to The Practical Wealth Show with Curtis May.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Practical Wealth Show. And today we have a great guest, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is, as if you know me, is business. To my mind, the fastest path to cash is business. And so we have Jon Ostenson. We're going to talk about think of this topic is why the non-food franchise opportunities are resonating with many real estate investors and entrepreneurs. And I want you to I want you to hear this as we talk about the different asset classes. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat. So what we want to do, put that out there for you for consideration. Should I go into your bio a little bit, Jon? So I'm going to give a little bit of paragraph of your bio. So just so you know who you're talking to, Jon is a consultant, an investor, an author, and an international speaker specializing in the area of non-food franchising. I think that's very important. And he draws on his experience as both the president of an Inc. 500 franchise system and a multi-brand franchise himself in serving, clients across these capacities. And he's also, he serves as the CEO of FranBridge Consulting, where he helps clients, people that are considering this, understand all the aspects of non-food franchising. And he's in the process of introducing from over 300 growth brands that he represents. Additionally, Jon oversees the FranBridge Capital, where he and his partners own 17 territories across 5 property service franchises. Jon, that's a long introduction, but welcome to the Practical Wealth Show.
Curtis, appreciate you having me. Look forward to our conversation.
It's always long when you're accomplished. So it's like, where do I start? So I left some stuff off, but that was good. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited about this conversation. Why you think franchising is hot, especially in the non-food, and who is buying, and why would you say they like this? Why are they buying?
Yeah. Well, first off, appreciate you having me, Curtis. And and I will say that year to date, deal flow is up over 50% over pre-pandemic levels. I mean, we're seeing an unprecedented level of interest in what we do, which is a lot of fun. It's a good time to be in franchising. And I think it's a combination of things. I think coming out of COVID, a lot of people have questioned the path they're on and said, maybe now's the time to scratch that entrepreneurial itch, and they're looking for that right avenue to do that. And then secondly, I think from an investor standpoint, there's what's called a semi-absentee model where maybe you put in 10 to 15 hours a week, in some cases 20 hours a week, but it's not your full time, but it is more of a side hustle. And right now we see a lot of capital on the sidelines. You've got stock market at an all-time high, interest rates very low, and then only so many good real estate deals to be had. So I think it's a good problem to have, but a lot of people do have that problem of trying to say, hey, where am I going to allocate my funding? And like you said, I love how you approach the topic, Curtis, is the different asset classes. I think being diversified, and when you're building a business on the side, you are building cash flow, but then also building an asset that's going to have exit value down the road. And it does give you, in somewhat of an inflation environment like we think we're in, it gives you the ability to raise prices. It gives you the ability to be nimble. Some people think of business ownership as a risk. I do think the franchising de-risk it quite a bit, though nothing's a
right.
sure bet, but it does definitely de-risk it. And I would say working for someone else is probably more risky than.
Listen, I always tell people you can get fired for one or two reasons: any reason or no reason at all. Okay, and in my mind, that's risky. Okay, yep. That's risky, and because there's no guarantees. There's only opportunity. Right. And so if you it depends on how hopefully if you're listening to my show, that's how you begin to, hopefully you're viewing the world as, there's opportunity. And, we train our people to see opportunity in every adversity. And so, COVID was a disaster or it was opportunity, depending on how you looked at it. And for us, it was an opportunity. For a lot of people that I'm like, listen, you can be a victim or a victor. And that's the thing. And I think it's the same thing with what you're talking about. I really like the idea of the sub-absenteeism. That really what makes it an asset, right? Because you can either own a job, but I always tell people this is a food franchise, but I would say, look, how do you know if this is back to Kiyosaki, you're in the S quadrant or the B quadrant? I say, go to McDonald's and say, hey, I'd like to speak to the owner. Right? And you will never find them. Now you got to ask that. Now you've got a business that works. You got people working, you got systems working. That's to me what franchising does.
Absolutely. And having the right people is so key. I mean, you can have the perfect model, but unless you're able to staff it with the right people, and that's the challenge in the market right now is the labor side. But I think having good leadership, putting that GM in place is absolutely key if you want to be semi-absentee. And I always tell clients, if you think it's going to take 10 hours a week, it'll probably take 15. If you think 15, it may be 20. So, I want them to go in eyes wide open that, there's no true absentee mailbox money type business that's worth doing. At least it's not that way in the early stage when you get it off the ground. But with franchising, you do, as I like to say, start on third base instead of first base, and building that little empire of yours.
Yeah. So what in your mind are the there's pros and cons to everything you allude to. I love your manage expectations approach, right? What are the pros and cons of franchising versus, hey, I want to start my own thing. I want to do my own thing from scratch, and you alluded to it. You start on third base rather than first, but let's talk about that.
Yeah, I'd say starting off with the con. I mean, and I have to tell some of my clients that franchising is not right for them. It's not right for everyone. In large part, what I oftentimes find is they're too entrepreneurial. They want to put their thumbprints all over something, and they're not willing to kind of follow the model. Conversely, it is the right path for probably the majority of people to at least consider. And that's because, some of those key things, you've got the franchisor that is really aligned with your interest. The better you do, the better he does, he or she. And so they're on the same team. They're coaching you, they're supporting you. I've seen this firsthand. I've been on the franchisor side myself, supporting franchisees. And then secondly, you've got franchisees around the country, other owners that are in that same boat you are, and they're testing different marketing vehicles. They're coming up with new strategies or ways of going about business, preferred vendors, bulk buying, stuff like that you're able to tap into. And then, a couple other thoughts. I mean, in some cases, it's a brand that has awareness. In a lot of cases, I'm working with emerging franchisors that there may not be a brand awareness in a market. And so that's not everything. But having that model, having that playbook, if you will, to use a sports analogy. Right. And then finally, I'd say, from an exit value, well, first off, on the financial side, you go in and you kind of know what to expect. I mean, again, it's not a given, but you've got what's called an item 19 within the franchise disclosure document, in which the franchisor, who's regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, is required to show you, here's how other franchise owners in the system are performing. Here's our average. In some cases, here's our upper quartile, mid quartile. So you're able to go in with much more than a pro forma on a napkin. You really understand, and you're able to talk to other franchise owners along the way, what we call validation. The goal is for you to have as much information to make a strong decision as possible, and go in understanding the expectations. And then finally, I'd say the exit value. Oftentimes this goes overlooked, but the Rinker School of Business recently did a study of over 2,000 companies across 10 years and compared them, by sector, comparing apples to apples as best they could in the industry, franchise businesses and non-franchised. And what they found is the franchise businesses, upon an exit, traded a multiple of about 1.5 times the non-franchised. And so people see that inherent value that franchising does bring to the table upon that exit, not just going in.
Let's say they do X amount of sales that could translate into X amount of dollars as you sell it. I want you to take that multiple and put that into layman's terms.
Yeah. So let's say all in your investment is $125,000. That'd be an example of quite a few property services businesses out there, or home services. And so that's your all-in investment. That's the franchise fee plus your startup, typically 3 to 6 months of working capital, plus maybe marketing costs, vehicle, equipment out of the gate. So let's say your all-in basis is $125 that you put in, and that may be funded by the SBA, may be funded by what we call a ROBS program, where you use your retirement funding. It could be a portfolio loan. There are a number of different ways to fund the business, but let's say you're all in at 125 and you've grown that business over 3, 4, 5 years, and you're doing, in round numbers, 500,000 in revenue. With, let's say, roughly a 20% operating, 25% operating margin, you're right around 125,000 that you're bringing in annually to you, the owner, right? Bottom line, EBITDA, put in your pocket. And so, obviously that's a good ROI. along the way, but you're also upon an exit. Let's say that in the property services space, they usually trade at 0.75 to 1.25 of sales, which translates into like a 3 to 5 EBITDA exit value. So let's just say we use that and go right in the middle. So one-time sales, that's 500,000.
Yeah.
Exit value that you're selling the business for. To me, that feels a little bit high in some cases. It really depends on the brand, depends on what else they have going on. But even if you take a conservative approach to that, there's meat on the bones. Let's just say you get half of that, 250. Again, this ROI it can be pretty strong, and it really opens up people's eyes when they realize not only can you make a 15 to 30% operating margin on the revenue day in, day out, but you can also sell at an exit value.
Yes, thank you. Because that's you got to look at, that's why it's an asset class, because you can live off of it. You can, our tax system is designed for landowners and business owners. So we haven't even talked about all of the other stuff that you can, all the income shifting you can do because you have a business, right? That's a whole other thing. And so what people are, complaining, you only make money by creating value in the marketplace. So all this profits or evils nonsense, you're not going to hear that on this show, right? And money follows value. So what happens is, as you pick and you work with Jon to look at your ideal thing that he's going to match you up with, the business is creating value in the marketplace, right? That you can make a living out of and then turn around and sell it if that's what you choose to do, or sell it to your kids. I wouldn't give it to them. That's another talk. But you can buy them out. You can we'll get into this a little bit later, I'm sure. You can come, they'll finance it. Just like you buy an apartment building, a lot of it. So that gives you additional leverage. So when you talk about the startup, it may not be all your money, right? And that's a certain amount of leverage. So, all right, I love talking money. So let's talk about, and here's the other thing, because I love that you do outside of food, because to me, the restaurant business is interesting. It's a lot of work and a lot of training and a lot of whatever, spoilage and all kinds of stuff, right? And so outside of food, what are the sectors that which are resonating with, some of your clients and people that you educate and share with the most?
Yeah, no, and I love talking about non-food franchising, because a lot of times when you say the F word franchise, people think of all the fast food joints.
Yeah, Burger King, McDonald's, right? Which are all wonderful things, by the way. We're not right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we need them, but I love educating on, hey, there's so much more out there within the world of franchising. And I don't have a background in food. I chosen to focus entirely on other sectors. And what I find is about 95% of my clients don't want food. 5% do, 95% don't. And we still do a little bit of food, but for the most part, not a whole lot. No, I think about franchise businesses really in 4 quadrants. You've got your B2C services, your B2B services, business to consumer, business to business. You've got your simple retail and your complex retail. And you've got everything from payroll and bookkeeping to janitorial and maintenance. You've got all sorts of concepts out there that deal with the senior population, which is obviously a huge demographic. You've got those that deal with education and children. So it's a wide gamut. And what I find is about 80% of my clients end up jumping into something that was not on their radar. So I have a lot of fun taking them through the process, understanding what they want that day in to day out to look like. Let's peel back the onion and then think about it as a business owner, not just as a consumer. But if I could, kind of summarize here, I'd say right now, non-sexy is the new sexy is the term I've used.
All right.
As far as what people are attracted to. They don't want trendy. They want proven concepts, pool cleaning, dumpsters, gutters, things that are essential and understandable. But what franchising does is it brings a much more professional white collar approach to what's oftentimes a blue collar fragmented industry. So you're able to go in and disrupt.
It's fun when you look at that book, The Millionaire Next Door, and they all had very non-sexy businesses, but and you wouldn't know it because they're not posing on Instagram next to their Bentley, but they work, they save money, they enjoy what they're doing, and it's just very, very profitable.
Yeah.
So, and that's that to me, as you describe that, that's the first thing I'm thinking about. Is like, hey, muffler shops and, just, lot of margin, a lot of money. And, it's not what you earn, is what you keep. So if you're a good steward of your money, if you're not, that same as plug, you need to call Curtis, because that's what I do. It's not what you earn, is what you keep, right? And how hard it works for you. But yes, that's a cool thing. And so now, all right, so we've got them. Franchise is interesting. There's non-sexy things. Help my listeners understand the financials, the costs, the revenue potential, et cetera. I think ultimately you go into business to, I always tell people, look, you go into business not to create jobs, but to live life on your terms, ultimately, right? For freedom and for, that kind of stuff. And so why would I do this? Because it's the money. Why would you do this? You need to figure out, it's A, I want to serve people, but B, there's nothing wrong with making money.
Yeah, no, you're serving people, you're serving customers, you're serving the community, creating jobs. There are a lot of ways that, entrepreneurship, I mean, Atlas Shrugged back in the day, Ayn Rand would say, capitalism, really does the most good and out there, and you're boosting the economy, but you're also providing a lifestyle and a legacy for your family, as I know you hit on a lot, Curtis. No, let's just look at an example, because I think that'd be most helpful. So I've got a client right now, and they're fairly well heeled, but they're in their mid 30s, and they've got some successful businesses. They're building out their portfolio. We're working on a 10 location oil change deal between Atlanta and Charlotte. Now, oil change, you might say, well, goodness, I keep reading about electric vehicles. Well, the facts are 10 years from now, only 7% of cars on the road will be electric. And so even though the manufacturing is ramping up and it's getting a lot of headlines, I mean, our power grid, frankly, can't support, to go too extreme there. So there's a long runway ahead for oil changes. Well, how many people love their oil change place today? Probably not. They're being upsold. It's inconvenient. This is one. It's a 10-minute oil change. You stay in your car. You don't get upsold. And I won't get into all the details behind it, but it essentially checks all the boxes on the consumer side. Mm-hmm. Now, on the owner side, what they use is unused parking spaces in a landlord retail shopping center. And so you get great street visibility. You're using 8 parking spaces, creating a revenue stream to the landlord. They love that. Mm-hmm. And they've got an investor group that actually backs prefabricated buildings, and they'll come in and do all the hookups for you in the pit dig. And so you're leasing the building from them. So you're able to get all in on this business for $150,000. In that case, it includes $25,000 in working capital. There are different ways to fund the business, obviously through SBA loans, as well as your own funding and retirement, for instance. So we'll say 150. That includes working capital. It gives you some padding. Well, the business, once it's mature, typically by year 2, it's averaging $335 in top line revenue per location.
Wow.
With about 100,000 hitting the bottom line. So, that's an example there. You'd say, all right, it's about a 33% operating margin, on revenue, but you look at that 100,000 versus the 150 that you invested. Do the math. I mean, that's 67.
Right. That's 100,000 every year, right? Yeah. That, from a one-time cost, and now you created because the passive income thing. What I've been moving away from that language of, I tell our clients, you want to develop asset-based income that you don't have to work for, you can't outlive, because Jim Rohn says that financial freedom is being able to live like you want to live from the income from your personally invested assets. So now if you start to look at this as buying, I tell people, look, you got to save money and you've got to look to buy or build cash flowing assets. That's got to be so I don't care what asset class it is. You just want passive asset based. I keep falling into it myself, but greater than your expenses. And then with the franchise, the management model, you said have a general manager, you can kind of create it where you don't just own a job, you own businesses. And now you can get more than one of these. Now you've got 300,000, okay, of or more, if you get better at marketing and, there's other stuff that you can do. So that's I like that.
No, the franchisor is supporting you on the marketing side. A lot of that's automated, but you're still getting involved in the Chamber of Commerce. You're sponsoring that Little League baseball team. Mm-hmm. You're still out there in the community forming referral partnerships. So maybe you get, the used car dealer or the rental car dealer down the street, on board with using your oil change on a regular basis. Forming those partnerships, that's typically the best use of time from a franchise owner that has that mindset that you described. And
yes, that's what I mean by marketing. I don't mean branding. I mean, the strategic alliances is who else needs your stuff before or after, they get your thing. That's who you want to position yourself with. And that's a stronger business, because now you have other businesses prescribing you as part of their process. Yeah. And that's gold. If you can work, I would spend all my time doing, that's all I would do. But anyway, so that's a whole other talk. But
no, you'd be really good at it too, I think.
Marketing, listen, one of the things I realized in our business was that once I realized I wasn't really in financial services business, I was in marketing. business. So I'm a big Dan Kennedy magnetic marketing,
Love it.
Guy, and Russell Brunson. But just understand. But that was a revelation for me. And I think a lot of people think, well, I'm just going to buy this thing and I pay about 150,000, and hey, this is going to be all bright lights and glamour. And that's again, I know you would talk to them about that, but you got to set the wrong expectation. You still got to learn how to run a business. You just got help. You don't have to learn it from scratch, but you need to be a good leader, a good business owner. And that's what I'm hearing. And if you're willing to do that, and if you're coachable, because if you're an entrepreneur, you can't go in and say, well, that's why. So you can't go, you want to make a McDonald's and you want to do McChitlins, or some crazy thing you want to make up. We can't do that. It's like Eddie Murphy coming to America, McDowell's, right? You can't steal their thing either. And all right, I see I'll go off on tangents. Let me
you got me hungry. It's coming up on lunch.
Right. So this is a non-food franchise talk, right? Sure. But so talk about, so you talked about revenue. Talk about, I guess, and you mentioned cost, but how do they get into them? I know you're going to talk a little bit about SBA loans and some of the ways to not use up all your cash, and other ways that you can get into this, and then why it's worth it from a revenue standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some great partners on the funding side that a lot of my clients work with, Fran Fund, Benetrends, Guidance, some of those that do franchise lending day in, day out. They also can help structure the ROBS program, which is the retirement rollover program. Got a great partner up in Charlotte, North Carolina that will do the portfolio loans for those that have 150,000 or more in their non-retirement accounts. And they want to use that as collateral and borrow against it without having to liquidate any positions. So, typically I refer these partners out, fairly early in the process, so that my clients can start to think about, how am I going to fund it? What's my best option? If some will use the HELOC if they have equity in their homes. There's a lot of ways to go about it. Yeah. And ultimately, the government wants people to become small business owners. So, in the SBA, while it takes a little while to get through the SBA process, that is definitely used by quite a few clients.
Okay. How do you know what's the right franchise to select? Out of the, so I heard a statistic one time. There's X amount of franchises, and then you help people. You boil it down to the top 300. What was the first number? How many types are there?
There are roughly 4,000 in the U.S., and a lot of businesses are going through the franchising process. You have new ones coming online, and they're not all created equal. And some are household names. If it's a household name, it's probably sold out in your market. So let's not. And Chick-fil-A is not offering franchises. I'll just stop that there. But no, so roughly 4,000. If you start Googling, what I find is people go down a rabbit trail, and you may see there are 5 locations on a brand's website. But what you don't see is there's 50 new locations opening up in the next 6 months that I am privy to the deal flow on the back end. So first off, roughly 4,000, we vetted those down to about 300. I'd say even with that, I've vetted them down to even more, a fewer number that I really am passionate about, that just see huge potential, that I see others in your situation in other parts of the country with a similar background, those that are resonating with them. So I'm able to kind of filter it down. And what I do with the client, it's entirely free to the client. So, great news there. There's no cost to them. I get paid by the franchisors on the back end, and it's a sales and marketing cost for them. So none of that is passed on. The franchise fee is the franchise fee. So entirely free. Typically what I do with the client, we'll get on a phone call, I'll get to know them, have them fill out a questionnaire, and then we'll come back about a week later, and I'll get on a Zoom call, share my screen, and walk them through 5 or 6 opportunities, give or take, that are available in their area that kind of meet their criteria, that I feel could be a good match for them to consider. Work with them to then narrow that down to 2 to 3 to really take the next step with, where I make that introduction to the franchisor. They get on an introductory call, no obligation, but they could get to decide if they want to continue in the franchisor's process, for another step or 2, or would they rather, potentially replace that with another one of our options. So what we try to do is streamline the process. We try to cut through a lot of the noise out there that you will find if you just start Googling. And we found a way to really match people up that works. Like I said, about 80% of my clients end up with something entirely not on their radar. And that's the fun part of my job. And I get validation when clients come back and make referrals, or they come back and buy additional territories. And that's definitely the norm. So I love what I do.
Do you think that, I love that. that will they come back and buy more? Do you see sometimes people will come back to you, but all right, I want to be in a different type, like they'll keep what they got, but they want to, all right, I want to do it in a different demographic, different territory, or just completely different. Like they want more what I call horizontal diversification.
Yeah. So there's two ways to go. Exactly. That's a great question, Curtis. So, some people look for that diversification within their business ownership. Some say, hey, I like the idea of having complementary businesses where maybe we can have some economies of scale of shared services. And that's what my partners and I do. So we have a pool cleaning business, a carpet cleaning business, and a home cleaning business.
Yeah.
And like I said, we have some good people running those for us, but we're able to cross market and cross sell with all of those.
Yes.
And so there's two different strategies. I've got a client in South Carolina that I recently did a deal with. He's the largest 2 men and a truck franchisee. So the moving service operates in about 10 markets, 39 years old, young guy. And he's built up a team, and, he sources people oftentimes through church, just some great folks that he's gotten to know that are values driven. And once they prove themselves out, he gives them an opportunity to go become a business owner. And so last year, he and I placed one of his people in a driveway franchise. It's a driveway pouring and repair franchise. We placed another one of his people in a business. It's really cool. And it's a truck with a big old crane arm on the back, and it goes up to roll off dumpsters and rolls back and forth and smashes down the waste to reduce the number of trips to the landfill. So, all sorts of unique business models out there. I work with all the emerging brands and the franchisor groups. I kind of get to see firsthand, the waterless car wash that just came out. New businesses that again, people wouldn't think of otherwise. But no, I see both that diversification, like in his case, as well as the complementary businesses, like, for instance, what we're doing here in Atlanta.
I love that. Yeah. So that is really good. I like the idea of, let me ask you, this is just out of curiosity, is he participating with the people that he puts in business, or they're just their own thing?
So he's very generous to those people, and he'll do roughly 50-50 or 60-40 where he's funding the business, but he's giving them equity. And in some cases, it may vest over time. Yeah. But again, I'd say that's a different approach than a lot of people. Most people I see go the profit sharing route, or maybe it's earned equity over time. Right. But with him, he's very generous from the get-go. And again, these are people that are proving themselves out and feel that sense of loyalty to him. And in both of those cases, both of those two deals, he's come back and bought additional territories.
Wow. I love that. That, because you're really putting your money where your mouth is in terms of developing, what the country's about, giving people a chance to own a piece of the action. But what happens is he's like a training ground, because they're learning how to be in business, how to be on time, how to think, how to be all that stuff. And then, okay, now here's your team. You get your head coach, your own team, and build your own equity. And now their kids are seeing their parents as self-employed people, and all this stuff. So that's really exciting. Jon, this has been great. Carly, I can talk to you all day, but I know you've got other things. I appreciate your time this morning. But how would they tell them what will be a good next step? They've heard us and they like what you're talking about. What's a good next step for people that want to inquire about what you're doing and opportunities for themselves?
Yeah, no, I would absolutely encourage everyone to go to our website, franbridgeconsulting.com. That's FRAN bridgeconsulting.com, and sign up for our newsletter there that comes out about once a month. Connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Jon Ostenson, Jon. And also feel free to shoot me an email. Would be happy to jump on 10-15 minute call and better understand your situation, and kind of be able to advise if it makes sense for you at the stage to be looking into business ownership. My email address is Jon.Ostenson, Ostenson at franbridgeconsulting.com. And like I said, we'd love to connect with any of your listeners.
Awesome. Hey, we're going to put all that in the show notes. I think that, for those of you that are thinking about business, it's worth a 15-minute call to find out if you're in a position to do that, what you have to do to get in position to do that. Whereas they probably come back to me and we can restructure their finances. But that's you got to be in business. Okay. And I don't even think with the way the tax code is, that's even optional. So you just got to find something that you like, that, excites you to get up in the morning, or the coach. And, there's a lot of ways. And one of the things you talked about, if you start looking, you might find something you didn't even expect but you wouldn't know because you're not looking, right? And so you kind of got to get in there and start taking action and not worrying about all of the lights being green before you leave the house.
I like to say activity breeds activity. And once you start moving towards option A or B, option C comes out of left field. So I love that, Curtis. You're exactly right.
Yeah, there you go. Jon, thank you so much for being a guest today on the Practical Wealth Show. I think you've dropped a lot of knowledge bombs. I hope y'all will reach out to Fanbridge and Jon and his team and, get yourselves in business.
Enjoyed it, Curtis. Thanks for having me.
All right. You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to Practical Wealth. To access the show notes and resources, go to practicalwealthshow.com. To get your questions on the show, go to practicalwealthshow.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any investment decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Practical Wealth. Written permission must be granted before